So good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome you to this lecture organized by Dance Context. The mission of our organization is to help dance grow. So besides dance journalism, we are facilitating an open dialogue between writers, artists, and cultural managers through the number of activities like workshops, lectures, discussions, and roundtables. So today, the topic is money, which is seen to be more and more important based on also the number of participants attending this lecture. So I'm very glad that thanks to the financial support of the European Union through the National Recovery Plan and the Ministry of Culture of the Czech Republic, we are able to invite amazing David Dixon to share his knowledge about possibilities and strategies of non-grant money raising. David has more than 40 years of experience in the field of fundraising and strategy building in non-profit sector. And also among his clients, we can find dance companies like Netherlands Dance Theatre, Royal Ballet, Northern Ballet Theatre, and Scottish Ballet. So in the next 2 hours, he will share information which might be highly relevant for us. And now I think, David, the floor is yours, and let's go to raise the money through fundraising.
Okay, good. By the end of this session, let's do that. So I'm going to share my screen. It was working a minute ago. Let's hope it works now. All right. Well, yes. So I see there are people from several countries, and one of the ones I want to find out is something about you as well. 40 years experience sounds like an awful long time, doesn't it? I mean, you know, I started when I was 5 years old, let's believe me. But I do have a lot of experience and experience in different countries. So first thing, I'll tell you a little about myself. By the way, I'm aware that English is not generally your first language. If you have any issues with words I'm using, and some words are familiar to you, but in fundraising have a slightly different meaning. So if there's any misunderstanding, please alert Daniela, who is moderating, and I'll try to clarify. So 30, wait a minute, 30 years. You added 10 years to me, Daniela. I think it's 30 years. Anyway, it's a lot of experience. I've stopped counting now, and almost all my work is fundraising for cultural organizations. I also work a little with universities, with hospitals, and with general non-profits, but almost all is with cultural organizations. So that's my personal preference. I have lived and worked in the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Spain, Germany. I'm currently in the United States, where I'm also working on these kind of topics, but I'm essentially European. And I'm the founder and director of TrueMotion. We are a European agency, and we do business strategy, fundraising strategy, and also applications to the European Union for our clients. And we've raised tens of millions of euros for our clients through European Union applications. I will skip over the next questions because, of course, eventually I hope to answer them in my presentation. So what does non-grant fundraising include? Actually, I'm going to tell you that in just a moment. And here's an interesting question for you. I think you all probably realize that cultural organizations, arts organizations in the United Kingdom and the United States are very successful at this kind of fundraising. Why? Where's the magic? Is it something about the people? Is it something about the organizations? So we're going to try and look at that as well today. There are myths of cultural fundraising. I should explain that, well, I'm British. Maybe you can hear that from my accent, but I've lived and worked in different countries. And in every different country I go to, I'm often starting fundraising for cultural organizations. Countries where there has been no experience of fundraising for the cultural sector. And I find exactly the same myths in every single country as to why it will not work here. The first myth, what is a myth? A myth is something which everybody knows. Everybody knows this. That you talk to each other, you have a drink. We know this, but nobody can exactly say why they believe it. It's just in the air. It's in the water, and that's a myth. And I have 10 for you. There are many more, but here are my favorite 10, which I hear everywhere. First, it won't work here. Now, I started fundraising for culture in 1991 in Oxford, in the United Kingdom. And at that time, there was no non-grant fundraising for culture in the United Kingdom. I almost started it myself. I mean, this is a big thing to say, but yes, I can tell you I did start this in the United Kingdom. When I moved from Oxford to try and get some work in London from clients, they said, maybe it will work in Oxford, but it won't work in London. We have too many organizations, so it won't work. Then I moved to try and get clients in the north of England. They say, it might work in the south, there's more money there. It won't work in the north of England. Then I went to Scotland, the same thing. It won't work here. What a pity, it won't work. Then I started working in Spain. It won't work here. The Netherlands, it won't work here. It does everywhere. This is when people are not familiar, they're a little afraid, and they say, it may work over there, it won't work here. And of course, the British in the early 90s said, maybe it will work in the United States, it won't work here. It does, it did. There is a view, maybe you have it also in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, that there is an Anglo-Saxon culture of giving. Certainly, people in the Netherlands have said this to me in Spain. The idea that we are born ready to give money to culture. It's part of what we do. But no, this is absolutely not true. In Britain, as I explained, fundraising for culture began in the late 1980s, early 1990s. I'm sorry, yes, late 80s, early 1990s, because of Margaret Thatcher. Before that, there was no culture of giving or culture of asking. The truth is there is no such thing as a culture of giving. There is a culture of asking. And the problem is not with the people of Britain or Spain or the Czech Republic or Slovakia. The problem is that cultural organizations don't know how to ask for money. People will respond if it's done properly. Business sponsors are considered the most important source of fundraising after the states. But I can tell you business sponsors are the least important form of fundraising when you compare it to individual donors, foundations. And I'll explain why in just a moment. But somehow this idea that businesses are really where you go if you need more money after the state has given all it will, this is simply not true. Businesses are very tough. And actually, it may not be the place you go, first of all. Small organizations, and I know many of you are small organizations, assume that big organizations have all the advantages. And of course, big organizations do have advantages. That's clear. But so do small organizations. The main thing is not to compare yourself with anybody else. The key thing is to think, why are we special? Do we have that we can work with? The fact that a bigger organization is doing something else is not relevant to you. It's not a competition. You're not competing for the same people, for the same donors. You have your own special space in the world, and that's what you need to concentrate on. People also like the idea of online crowdfunding. It seems like it's a source of magic. You put your project online, and suddenly the millions of dollars flow to you. Actually, I do have an example later of a crowdfunding campaign that raised $1 million. Very interesting example. And then I will explain how this artist did that. Online crowdfunding can be part of the answer, but it is not the answer. And as Daniela has explained, crowdfunding online also takes a lot of work. So it may be part of the solution, but it is not a magic answer. Politicians like crowdfunding because it seems that it's digital and trendy, and this is the answer. And if cultural organizations all did online crowdfunding, they can get away with funding the culture less. That's what they like. There is an idea that donors, private donors, individuals, only give money because they get something in return. And perhaps you have been to the United States or Britain and you see that a donor will get invitations to special events, maybe their name on the website, these kind of things, and those are important. The idea is that this is why they give money. That's completely wrong. And we'll talk about major donor motivation shortly. Tax breaks. This is my favorite excuse, is that if only the government would change the tax system, the money will flood into our cultural sector from private donors. Tax breaks are important. You need to understand it, but it absolutely is not key. In Britain, if you give money to a cultural organizations, you get no tax advantage at all, zero. Because of the way the organization does get an advantage, the money you would have paid in tax goes to the people who get the money, the charity, the cultural organization. So for the private donor, there is no benefit in tax system of giving him money to a cultural organization. Tax breaks are important because you need to know about them so you don't seem stupid, but tax breaks are not a motivation for donors, not at all. There is an idea that if you want to raise donations, raise money from individuals, you need some kind of membership program or friends program or gold and silver circles. Well, maybe they could be part of the structure, but actually you don't need that at all. And once you set up structures, you give yourself tasks for the future, you set up responsibilities. So I would think very carefully before setting up some kind of membership program. Fundraising is about selling. This is a bit of a problem, is that it's often people think that in order to raise money, you have to just talk a lot and explain why you are fantastically special. It's all about you. We do this, we do that. It's really important. Well, you do need a good story, but selling is not what you are doing. You're making relationships. You're finding out about them as much as selling from your side. We will talk more about this. And there's also a great myth, is that fundraising is somehow about money. Well, of course it's about money. In the end, if all your work leads to no money, you haven't done your job well. But fundraising is not first about money, it's first about people. And unless you understand that, you will fail. So let's look very specifically at how fundraising works. There are two essential ingredients. If you decide to leave this presentation soon, please write down just these two things, and you've already got something from the session. The first one is storytelling. You must be able to tell your story effectively and in a brief way. I'm not talking about a 50-page manual with pictures of all your performances. I'm talking about being able to speak in a few sentences or write down in a few words why you are incredibly special, incredibly unique, and why only you can do what you do. You need your story well prepared. It's also about networks, because there is no point having a great story if you have nobody to tell the story to. So you need a good story and you need people who will listen to the story. And in case of fundraising, we're talking about people who have money, obviously. That could be businesses, it could be foundations, it could be private individuals. So you need a good story and you need networks. If you don't have networks, then you need to develop them. And we'll talk about that also today. Here are the sources of fundraising income that I will be talking about today. The first is private foundations. This is a little bit more like government grants. I'll talk about them in a second, but private foundations, not government institutions. Major donors, rich people. I love rich people because they have money. So major donors, how do you get rich people to give you money? Supporters and fans. I mean, this is a broad group. This is people you know. It could be people who buy tickets. It could be people who are part of your mailing list. It could be people you've met at conferences. So it's just a group of people you know who, as far as you're aware, are not particularly rich. Businesses, certainly, they can be part of it. Crowdfunding online, I will talk about that. I will not talk about legacies, that is, people making a gift in their will when they die. I'm not talking about it because it's a subject all of its own, and I would imagine that it's not relevant for you in the short term because this kind of program takes some time to build up. I should say that if you take the cultural sector in Europe as a whole, everybody, legacies are the biggest potential source of money. It's the gold standard for the cultural organization. But it won't come quickly. So I'm leaving that to one side. If in the future you would like another discussion of legacies, fine. But in the position of a small company just starting fundraising, please be aware of it, please research it, but I don't recommend you start here. And of course, the European Union. I won't talk about that today. You've had masterclasses. We can help you if you think you want to make an application to the European Union. You can join in consortia with other organizations around Europe as well. I won't talk about that today. So you see, there are 5 areas I'll be discussing today. So here we go. Let's first ask, how do you do fundraising? From foundations. First, you need to research foundations. You can research in many ways. Firstly, just ask other people or look at their websites. Who did you get money from? And you'll see some of the same foundations mentioned on many websites. Your friends will tell you about them. These foundations may not only be in your own country. There are plenty of foundations in Europe which give across borders. There are also online references where you can literally search a database of foundations and see which is appropriate for you. Some of them cost a little money in a subscription, and maybe I shouldn't recommend this, but you can, in fact, buy one subscription and then share the access code between you. You should not do that, but you can, especially for small companies. But yes, there are reference online, and the libraries may also have reference material about foundations in the Czech Republic, possibly even at European level. You can search by keyword. So you're mostly, I think, dance companies or dance theatre companies. And so you can look at that. So these are foundations which support cultural organizations, and a few really like dance. On the other hand, you probably do more than that. Firstly, you are located in a certain city or region, and there are some foundations which support activities in that city, in that region. So you will get the money if they like you because you're in that city. The fact is, dance is a secondary importance. You may also think about the effect of the work you do. Now, dance is well known to be very good physically for people who participate. And so you could consider, depending on the nature of your work, you could consider the idea of applying to foundations which like the idea of physical movement, say, amongst older people. And some companies in the Netherlands and in Britain do exactly that. And they're funded partly because of the effects of movement on physical health and also mental health. You can look at that. So if you think about it from outside, cultural organizations tend to be very inward looking. But if you stop for a moment and imagine from outside the organization, what is it that you do apart from the core program? How do you benefit your city? How do you benefit people who attend your performances? Do you offer training to young people? Well, is this education? Possibly it is. Please consider all the aspects of your work. Once you've done your basic research, you make a list of top priorities, and then you do more detailed research about them, possibly even calling them up. You can prioritize them. I mean, I hope you have a very long list. You need to prioritize, and you can prioritize by how closely you seem to match their priority list, their policies. And most foundations state their policies on their website, or you can call them and find out. So if you seem to be a very good fit for their policy, that's great. But also, how much money could they give you? So you can simply make a little matrix of size of money they could give and how closely you match their policies. And then you come out of this with a top priority list, top 5, top 10, and you start there and you do more detailed research. The other foundations you put to one side, you can bring them in later. If possible, you can contact the foundation. Some of them encourage this by email or by phone, and you can speak to them, have a conversation. Just initial conversation, just to clarify something, explain what you do. And this is really just just getting the conversation started. Don't push too hard at this point. Ideally, you're trying to make friends so they know who you are. You've given them some information. They've given you information. From your point of view, it will prevent you spending a lot of work making an application to a foundation where you will not succeed. There's no point in sending 1,000 applications to foundations when you will not succeed with 990 of them. Really only prioritize those where there seems to be a good chance of success. You get more information, they know you, and at this point, maybe you take a few foundations off your priority list. And with foundations, you need to write the application exactly in the way they request. Now, foundations are all different. Some of them have very strict rules about how you make application. Some of them are much more freeform, and they simply say, send us 2 pages, describe what you do, and we will consider it. But whatever they want, that's what you do. Because if you think about it from their point of view, they get thousands of applications. And it really doesn't help them if every one of them is in a different format, or if you don't provide the information they need. So you must help them to consider your application possibly. How do they want the application? And you do that. If you get the money, make sure you acknowledge them in the way that they want. Do they want their name on your website? Do they want the name associated with a particular project? Do they want you to invite them to the opening night of a performance, for example? So you certainly need to acknowledge them. And if they're not clear, ask them. How would you like to be acknowledged? They will appreciate the request because they like the idea that you are grateful and that you want to tell everybody else that they have given you money. And if you do get the money, this is the start of a relationship. Cultural organizations tend to think one project, then another project, then another project. Actually, from fundraising, you do the opposite. You think about developing relationships. Although this year you have one project, you must get money for this one project. Next year, you will have another project, and you don't want to start from zero again. So if you do get the money, make sure you stay friends, give them reports, invite them to things as much as they want, because next year you want to go back to them and ask for more money. The source of money from foundations, you always start with the people who gave you money last year. And as long as you've done your job in staying friendly with them, they're likely to fund you again because now they know you, now they trust you. If you don't get the money, try to find out why. It may be that really there is no chance. Well, it's good to discover that. It may be that your application was good, but this year they had too many applications and could not support everybody. Maybe your application was okay, but it was not exactly what they were looking for. Well, if you know that, then maybe next year you can give them exactly what they're looking for. So try to find out why. I'm going to move on now to major donors, that is rich people. And rich people, please understand that rich people are just like us, exactly the same as us, with one exception. The exception is they have more money. Now, I'm sorry, I'm assuming something here. Maybe some people on this call are very rich, in which case, that's great. Please stay silent or else everybody will want to be your friend. But rich people are just human beings. Maybe they inherited their money. Maybe they made their money in business. Maybe they're very successful with the lottery. Who knows? But rich people have motivations and they have problems and they have families and they have their own preferences. So rich people are just like us. It's just that they have more money. So you have to get to know them as people. How do you find major donors? There's no point in sending a letter to a rich person you read about in the newspaper. Many countries have a magazine which gives you a list of the top 100 rich people in the country. There's one in the Netherlands. And so I know fundraisers who've gone and just bought the magazine and sent a letter to each of the top 100. And do you know how much money they get? Zero, nothing at all. You have to know these people. So what you do is you investigate your personal networks. I say you, I mean you and your colleagues and your friends and the people on your board, if you have a board. Who do you know? Do you know people with money? Do you know people who know people with money? So not immediately, but you know somebody who moves in these circles. And all you're doing here is trying to investigate the strength of your network. Who do you know? Who do they know? And can you now begin to get in touch with people who have money? By the way, one thing I didn't say at the start is that there is no definition of major donor. The question of what is a major donor is entirely up to you. If you receive a gift of $5,000, I imagine for many of you, that's fantastic. If somebody gave you 5,000 euros, maybe you will think that's fantastic. The Metropolitan Opera in New York don't get really excited until somebody's giving them 5 million. And some of the organizations I know for a long time in the United Kingdom, when I started working with them in the early 1990s, they would also have been very excited by £5,000. Now they don't get excited before £500,000. So you decide what's exciting for you. How much money is exciting? €1 is not exciting. €10 not exciting. €100, maybe. €1,000, I imagine you're all getting quite interested now. I can put this the other way around and say, how much time are you prepared to spend developing a relationship with a person, given the amount of money they could give you? Maybe you're not sure, but you think, okay, this guy's a millionaire and a millionaire could give you 50,000. They could. Okay, well, maybe we can spend some time getting to know this person. If you think they could only ever maximum give you 2,000, well, you don't spend quite so much time getting to know them. So in your networks, you're trying to find where you have contacts with people with significant money and how you get to them. If you have a mutual contact, that is somebody who knows you, but also knows a wealthy business person, somebody from an old family which still has money, somebody who won the lottery, wherever, it doesn't matter, then can this person in between arrange a coffee? Just that, nothing else. You're not applying for money at this stage. You're just trying to get to know them. Would they like to attend a performance? Would they like to go for dinner with the chair of the board, if you have a board? These kind of things. And with your mutual contacts, the person who knows both of you, you're trying to discuss what's the best way to start. Would they like to come to a performance? Is a coffee the best thing? Are they status conscious? So was the chair of the board important here? On the other hand, do they just love dance so much and they really want to come to a rehearsal? We don't know. So that's one of the questions for your mutual contact. What's the best way to at least get in contact with them? You're not selling. The first meeting you have with anybody who could potentially be a major donor or a link in the chain to get to a major donor is not about selling. Of course, you need to say something about what you do, but the most important thing is to find out about them. What do they love? What do they hate? What about their family circumstance? If you find out their young daughter is now going to a ballet class, well, that's a good thing to know. It means they have some kind of interest in dance at a family level. I've met many very successful business people, mainly men, some women, and they say, you know what, I've made millions from investing in the stock market in London. When I was younger, I used to play guitar. I just love music. And you don't know that unless you get to talk to them. Now you know that they used to love playing the guitar. They still have a little collection of guitars upstairs, and occasionally they go upstairs and play Rolling Stones music on their guitar. That's interesting because maybe some of my clients in the music world can do something with that and engage them more with music, and eventually, possibly, a donation will follow. Finding out about them, their context, their circumstances. If you find out their mother is about to die, you have to leave that for a while and come back to it later. They're human beings. As you would do that with your neighbors and friends, you understand their context and try and understand their motivations. This is a process which continues. You don't get all this information in the first meeting. It's a process of building a relationship. So it may not be a close relationship, but if you understand them, they trust you. They don't feel you're trying to sell them something all the time. Then you can develop a relationship, bring them a little more into the work you do, introduce them to other people you know, some dancers, some members of your board, whatever it might be, other donors. That's always a good thing. Introduce them to other donors if you have some. And then you build a relationship. And at some point, it will be the right moment to say, you know, this project for next year we've been talking about, we still need 10,000 to make the budget work. Is that something you could help us with? And by then they say yes or no. But at least they will listen to that kind of request. And you've made it at the right time. And by the way, I say 10,000. If you know something more about them, you could ask for 50,000. So at the right moment, you will ask them for support. If you get the money, make sure you acknowledge them as they ask. The idea is that in the United States, everybody wants their name on the outside of the building. Some people do. Many people in the United States are anonymous. And the reason you don't know their names is because they're anonymous. So do not assume that these people all want fame and reputation. Some do, some don't. So you ask them, look, we're very grateful for this gift. 10,000, that means a lot to us. So how would you like us to acknowledge you? Shall we put your name on our website? If it's a very big donation, you can put your name on the building if you have a building. Would you like invitations to special events? And they will tell you what they want. And that's what you do. Don't make assumptions. If you get the money, well, actually, again, really, you want this to be the start of a relationship. Because for them, giving money to you is fun. It's exciting. They meet with other business people with gray suits and blue ties every day. You are exciting. You are interesting. You are probably something they really wish they could have done more in their life. So this first donation is a privilege for them, really. You have to realize that for many people, giving money to a cultural organization is a privilege. They really feel special if they've helped you to do some magic on the stage. So if they're happy with the first donation, then stay in touch, keep them warm, and next year you have another project. See if they will support that. And also ask them if they have friends who would be interested, because rich people have friends who are rich people. This is what I mean about networking. If you don't get the money, try to understand why. And it may be something completely understandable. their business suddenly had a huge problem and they couldn't spare any money. Their mother became sick and they have expensive hospital bills. Or yes, they like you, but the crisis in Gaza has really tugged at their heart and they're giving all their money to supporting Palestinians who are in trouble at the moment. So it could be something temporary. But if you know that, you can take a step back and maybe approach them again in a year's time. So try to understand why not. Often it's something which is nothing to do with you. So this is how major donor fundraising works. This is it. This is the key to major donor fundraising. If you imagine you're standing on a very beautiful pond, a beautiful lake, it's very still, and you drop a stone into the pond and it will spread out. The ripples will spread out across the water. That's how major donor fundraising works. You start where you are and you try to work out in circles from your first contacts and then from the second contacts and then from the third contacts. This can take some time. So take your time. You could be lucky and you could get a big donation from the first or the second or the third person that you speak with, but it may take longer. But unless you start now and unless you spend some time developing those relationships, you will never get the money. So start now, make it part of your work. In the United States, the UK, and now more in the Netherlands, directors of organizations, and also, for that matter, artists and artistic directors spend some of their time talking with donors and potential donors. It's part of the job. So you need to make it part of your job and others of your colleagues and maybe board members. Part of your job is to making friends with wealthy and influential people. Because part of the job of the management of your company and part of the job of the board or the supervisor of your company is to make sure resources are available to do the work you do. This is part of it. Make relationships, keep relationships. Never assume that you understand their motivations. People do this. I've actually been in meetings where people sit down and write down what they must offer because they seem to think they know the motivations of wealthy people. You don't. Every single person is different. They're real human beings with different motivations. Don't start writing down programs of benefits before you've spoken to the people you want to engage with. A big amount of money for you may be a small amount for them, so don't be scared. Now, the idea of, when I start talking about this work, people get very scared because the idea of asking somebody for a gift of 500,000 euros seems incredible. It's terrifying. But actually for them, this could be a relatively small amount of money. They're not scared by this. They deal in millions every single day. They're doing trades with the Japanese worth $1 billion. So for them, this is a small amount of money. It's still important. And they're not going to give you anything unless you've done your work and explained what you do and why you do it and how they can be engaged. But don't hesitate to ask for a large amount of money if you think it's the right amount of money. I actually do training sessions for boards of cultural organizations, including some very big ones. And literally, there are people I meet in those training sessions who are the founder or managing director of very large international companies who do deals worth billions every day. They're terrified to ask their friends for a gift of 50,000 euros. So this is part of what I do for them. Remember that you have something special. It's easy to be overwhelmed by the idea of this incredibly successful person with millions of euros in the bank, that somehow they're big and you're little. That's not true. They have more money, they're very successful, give them credit, give them honor for that. But basically, you do something which for them is magic. If it isn't, you won't talk to them. So they think you have something very special, and that's what you're bringing to them. You're bringing some kind of magic to them. I have an example of that in a moment. And you engage with the donor or potential donor with your work as much as they want, because the key here is to get people to feel somehow engaged with your work. The moment I like is when a donor, first of all, starts saying we. What are we doing next year? Whoa, if they're saying we, you've got them. But there's two-way also, remember that. They're not a cash machine. They feel engaged, so you must engage them in a way which works for both of you. And literally, sometimes donors say thank you to the organization they give the money to, because you have offered them the chance to do something meaningful with with their life, something which they would never do otherwise, and something which is close to their heart, but which they can't directly do themselves. And so just to stress, we're dealing with major donors. It's not like making an application. There's nothing like making an application. This is completely different from applying to the government for a grant or even applying to a foundation. They're real people. You want to make friends with them, find out what motivates them, and provide them with something which gives meaning and magic to their lives. I'm going to give you an example now, which is, it's one of many examples, but this is Northern Ballet Theatre in Leeds in the United Kingdom, a dance theatre company. And they had a director previously, an American guy, so he was American, so he knew what fundraising was about. And they identified in their audience a local business person. And he had recently sold his business for some millions. He wasn't super rich, but millions is still good money, thank you. And so he would come to the events and they would keep inviting him to social events and making friends with him. Nothing was working. And by accident, they invited him to a rehearsal, an early rehearsal in their next production, their next piece they were making. And he was entranced. And the director of the Northern Ballet Theatre sat next to him and was talking to him as the rehearsal was going on, explaining what choices they were making and what they were thinking about for the costumes and the sets, and how this interpretation of the piece was different from something they did in London last year. And this guy was entranced. And the director of the Northern Ballet Theatre realized that for this guy, the process of making a piece of dance theatre was astonishing and magic. And so he didn't want his name on the website. He didn't want to attend the fancy dinners with champagne. He didn't want to be involved on the board of the organization. What he wanted to do was to sit in every single rehearsal from the start, ideally with somebody explaining what was happening and why they had made the choices they made, and then attend opening night. So he has been part of making some magic. And they got a serious gift of money from this guy. He kept supporting them for years after that, because they understood what his motivation was, and they engaged him in a way that he found very satisfying. I'm moving on now to businesses. Don't forget to store up your questions for the last part of the session. Businesses. There are many different kinds of businesses. They are not cash machines. They do not exist to give you money. This is countries which come first countries which start fundraising for culture, they first of all realize they will not get any more money from the national government or the local government. So then they think, aha, businesses have got a lot of money, and they write applications to businesses as if they were another grant-giving organization. They're not. Businesses do not exist to support dance companies or any kind of cultural organization. This is not their purpose. They have more than one purpose. Their main purpose is making a profit for their shareholders, but they also have other purposes, like being a good citizen in their town or country. Many of them have a mission which is about protecting the environment or training young people. I mean, businesses have all kinds of motivations in addition to their central purpose, but they're not cash machines. You cannot make applications to them. It's a transaction. Here's the thing. Businesses give money. No, the businesses don't give money. Businesses pay money. Mostly. There are some exceptions, but essentially businesses pay money for something they're buying. Now, this means you have to offer them something. Now, what can you offer them? Well, you have to think, what do you have which could be valuable for them? And it will be different for every business. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about what kind of value you may have for businesses. But again, you need to step away from your internal perspective. You work with your colleagues and your artists because you find that really important. Fantastic. But you need to take a step outside and you think, okay, this business over here, well known in our city, what do they want to achieve? And do we have anything which is of interest to them in addition to the dance? It may be that the dance is less important to them, but actually the fact you're an important element of the cultural fabric of your city is really important. So you need to think what it is you could offer to a business which you can talk to them about. Again, it's good if you can get to know the decision makers in the business because they will tell you what they want. They don't want to waste your time. They don't want to waste their time. So at first meetings, you can often get them to explain what it is they're trying to achieve. We have a problem at the moment with recruitment. We can't find enough people to employ in this company. We're trying to break into the market in Germany. Okay, well, that's an important thing. Maybe you can help somehow. We don't know. We just had a big problem with the politicians in the local government. Maybe you saw it in the newspaper. And right now, we need to improve our reputation locally, generally. These are motivations a business could have. And it could be you can help them. Always approach it from the point of view of what can you do for them. And then you may be able to do a deal with them. So you may often have a value for them that you do not see yourself. So talk to them and also ask others from outside who are not involved in what you do and say, why are we important for this city? Why are we important for this country? Why are we important for young people? Whatever it might be. What things do you have of value, even if you don't think it's very important? The best business partnerships are based on shared values. Now, I hope you do know what your core values are. By values, I don't mean your program. I mean why you're on this earth, what it is you do. You want to promote movement amongst younger people. You want to give young people confidence. You want to be an important part of the cultural provision for your city, your country, whatever it might be. You are very concerned about the environment. And so you do your work in such a way that minimizes your carbon footprint. Things like this. These are your values as an organization. And it's good to find businesses which have the same kind of values. And businesses do all have values. They don't all write them down. Some of them are implicit, but they all do have values of some kind. And if you can share values with them, then you can talk about the detail of how you might work together. Now, of course, it does help if you know the owner or the managing director of the business. That's really useful because then you can have a conversation right from the outset where you explain what you're trying to achieve and they say what they're trying to achieve, and then maybe you can talk some details. It certainly helps. It's still the case with a few businesses that they're controlled by one individual, or maybe a family. And in these cases, if the individual or the family loves you, they give you money. Even if the marketing manager hates the idea, if the boss tells them to give you money, they're going to give you money. This is less like a transaction. And I must say, this was true 20 or 30 years ago. In most places, it is no longer true. In most places, you have to really put a business case to get money from a company. Again, it is not like making an application. This is a transaction. You need to understand what you do, and you need to have some idea of price for things you could offer, but you're not at first trying to sell that. At first, you're trying to find out what they need, and then you can make a proposal to them. It's a proposal. It's a business proposal. So what kind of value could you have for a business? Well, your audiences could be their customers. That's a very basic thing. If you're willing to share information on this company and its products to your audiences, that could be valuable to them. Your brand and reputation could enhance their own. Some of you will have actually a very good reputation for creativity, for training young people. I don't know. And if your brand and reputation is high, it doesn't matter if you're small, then you can be sharing part of your brand and reputation with them. So association with you could make them seem like a much more creative organization, or an organization which cares about young people, these kind of things. Some people, some businesses really want to show they're a good citizen of their city or their country. And so this kind of pride, the desire to be a good citizen could work in your favor. Because by giving you money, maybe they also support the football club. Okay. Maybe they also support the local hospital. Okay. But you're part of the fabric, the cultural fabric of your city or your country. So maybe they will also support you simply because you're part of the fabric of society. You have to show them that's true and make sure that everybody understands that they're supporting you. But again, this is what I mean by values which you don't immediately see. Some of you may tour internationally. I did some work with the Concertgebouworkest, the famous orchestra in Amsterdam a few years ago. And I toured to the United States and to Germany with some of their people to try and build up a local membership scheme. And the sponsor of the orchestra was ING Bank. And ING Bank did it because they were building up their business in those locations. And they wanted to be part of the network of people who attend orchestral performances. And of course, people who attend orchestra tend to be middle class or well off. And so ING thought this was a great idea to be part of the orchestra's international touring, because that way they would be in contact with all the important people in that city, in Tokyo or New York or wherever it was. It's possible you could do that. So this is a direct marketing benefit. It's possible that you have content, I'm talking about images, videos, and performers that they might like. I'm going to give you an example of this in a moment. There was a trend a few years ago, I think it's dying down a little now, of actors giving instruction in presentation to people inside businesses. Actors are trained to perform in front of a crowd. If you're a middle manager in a company that's a supermarket, you're not trained to perform, and yet you have to go and do conferences. And I don't know if you've ever been to business conferences. They're usually really bad in terms of the presentation that people make. Some people are naturally good, well, fantastic. Mainly they have a lot of PowerPoint slides and speak badly. And any actor who has been trained can explain to them how to make it better in terms of delivery. Less PowerPoint slides, please, more anecdotes, pause for breath. And, so some theatre companies were being paid by businesses, so actors would go and help their people be good at conference speaking. And this may be true with dance. I mean, in Britain, there's a trend at the moment of companies setting up choirs inside their organization. It's really for employee benefit. Singing in choirs is a great communal activity. And it takes you out of your everyday life. And so some choral organizations and music organizations are making good money by setting up choirs inside businesses. Now, you wouldn't think of this immediately. What about dance movement sessions? It's not your core business, but you could organize it. Some of your dancers probably would welcome the extra money if they're doing it a few hours a week inside businesses. You get money for organizing it. They get the performers, and their employees are happy, and they will also give you some money on top for your company. So engagement of their staff, I just gave you a couple of examples there, and there will be more. And you don't know what they are until you talk to them. I've just given you some examples. You could think of more, but when you go and talk to them, well, you can explain these ideas, but you want to listen to their situation. They may tell you what their priorities are and what their problems are. Well, maybe we can help in this way. I'm going to give you an example here. This is the beautiful Watermill Theatre in Newbury. It's in the south of England, about an hour west of London. And it really is an old watermill. It's beautiful. And some actors from the Royal Shakespeare Company in the 1960s decided this was a great place to make a theatre. So over the years, they made it into a proper theatre, and there's a small cafe bar. And it's become very successful, in fact, because it's very high quality. And they perform here, they tour to London, and some of their shows have been very big on Broadway in New York. But basically, they're a very small theatre and always struggle for money. And so they were talking with a local firm of solicitors, lawyers in Newbury. And they were trying to get just a small sponsorship, £5,000. And the law company, the solicitors, could not understand why this would help them. But in a conversation, they came up with an idea together. And what they ended up doing was that the staff of the law company, of the legal firm, every year would produce a play, which they performed in. They wrote and they performed in it with the direction and the support of the directors and actors from the Watermill Theatre. And so it became part of the program, the artistic program of the theatre. This company once a year would perform a play that they had written and they performed about some kind of legal matter. Now, that sounds very dry, but of course, what an actor and director is very good at doing is taking a dry topic and finding the human interest inside it. So imagine a situation where two business partners come to fight, or two people are getting divorced, or there is a question about adopting a child. Now, these are legal matters, but behind the legal matters are human interest stories. And so the legal company would perform the story behind some of the legal things they deal with. And of course, all the family and friends and neighbors of the people performing, all these people from the law company would come. So every year it's sold out completely. They sell a lot of tickets for it. And it is great advertising for this law company. And the law company then gave the Watermill a lot of money in sponsorship because they were so delighted with this arrangement. So this is just one example. I'm not suggesting you immediately go out and find a law company in your area and offer them the chance of doing a dance performance every year to demonstrate how you deal with intellectual property law using dance. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I'm suggesting you be creative. You are creative people. Be creative with the people you're discussing, with whom you're discussing in business. I'm moving on now. Let's look at the time. That's okay. Audiences and supporters. This is a mixed bag. Really, the question is, first thing to say, very important, and this is common in many countries, is the word for audience is the same as the word for public, the public, el público, das Public. Your audiences, the people who buy tickets for your shows, are not the public. They are your people. But a lot of people in marketing in some countries, in cultural organizations in some countries, do not understand the difference between the people who come to the shows and people who do not come to the shows. The public is all the people out there in the world who might come to your show. But once they've bought a ticket, they're your people. You know they like you because they bought a ticket. That's the best indicator you could have that they like what you do. Maybe they didn't like this performance and they won't come back again. But if you're starting, you start with the people who buy your tickets. I understand that for many companies, this is a problem because it is the venue, the theatre, which keeps the information on the ticket buyers. But if you can get the information, including contact details for the people who buy tickets, that's great. That's a really good starting point. You may also have a mailing list for information. Maybe people completed a survey. Anywhere that you can get a list of people who have even a little interest in you, then you could ask them for a donation. So if you may have multiple lists, a list of people who get the newsletter, a list of people who filled in the survey, some people who bought tickets for this venue or that venue, bring them together, and then you can, because this is some indication they like what you do. And these are the people you're working with to ask for a donation. And once you have that list assembled and you've taken out duplicates, you can simply email them or phone them or even write an old-fashioned letter and ask them for a donation. It's not an expensive process. And if it works, you can keep it going for a long time. It's ideal to try and get a regular monthly donation through the banking system. It's better to ask for €5 per month than €100 cash now, because that €5 per month through the banking system will keep going for many years. They won't cancel it unless they die or move to Australia or they run into their own financial problems or you do something which they don't like. That €5 per month will keep going, whereas 100, they may never give money again. So go for €5 per month if you can, or 10, whatever you think is possible. Try to get a regular monthly donation. These kind of programs start small. They take a little bit of work to get going, but they can build up. So many cultural organizations now in Britain and the United States get hundreds of thousands each month from these small monthly donations, which have been going for a long time. I'll give you a little story, actually. I've just reminded myself of one of my clients, which is also in Leeds by coincidence, the West Yorkshire Playhouse. It's the main theatre in Leeds in the north of England. I did a lot of work with them 20 years ago. And we raised a lot of money from a few thousand people who were on their ticket database. And many of these people were giving £5 or £10 per month. And then the director changed and we lost contact with them. The new director wasn't interested. But then 10 years after that, literally 10 years after that, the new director, so this is the third director after the first one I knew, called me up and said, you do fundraising for culture, maybe you can come and talk with us. So I did. I went to talk to them. And to be honest, their situation had not really changed. And at some point, I said, okay, listen, I want to know the starting point. Do you get money from businesses? Yes, we have this sponsor, this sponsor. Okay, good. Do you get money from foundations? Yeah, we apply here, we apply here. Okay, you have that under control. What about small individual donations? Do you get any of those? Oh, yes. We get about £15,000 per month from a small group of donors. I said, that's interesting. Where did they come from? They said, we don't know. They had lost memory inside their organization of how these people started giving money, but they were the same people that I had helped them collect 10 years previously. And these people had been giving £5 or £10 per month every month for 10 years. That's a lot of money. And the theatre could not remember why they started giving, and actually in many cases had not communicated with them for years. It was a crime. If I could have reported them to the police, I would have reported them to the police because it's criminal. Anyway, my point is, on a positive note, that if you get these programs started and you have a reasonable number of donors, even a few hundred, then they go on forever if you can get them to give you a monthly donation. And of course, if they are giving you a donation, there is no problem with asking them for another donation or a larger donation next year. I've done many of these campaigns. If you do the ask, that's a fundraising phrase, the ask. If you do the ask in an appropriate manner, not too often and not too crazy, then even if people say no, they don't mind that you asked. If they say yes, you have a bit more money. Here's an example. This is from the Netherlands. This is a particularly unusual example, but it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. The building you can see there is an old bathhouse. Many European cities used to have communal bathhouses. People didn't, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, people did not have a bathroom in their own home. So most cities in Europe had some kind of communal bathhouses. And once a week, you and the family would go to the bathhouse, have a good bath, you'd be clean for the rest of the week. But of course, now you don't need them because most people do have a bathroom at home. So Amsterdam has about 15 or 20 of these bathhouses around the city, and they had to find a new purpose for them. What were they going to do? And a group of musicians discovered that the city of Amsterdam was going to get rid of this bathhouse in the center of town. And the musicians asked the city council, listen, if we can raise the money, can we take it? Can we use it for our rehearsal space and a small performance space? City council says, sure, but we can't fund it. So if you come up with €500,000 in 2 months, it's yours. We will give you a long lease at low rent, but you have to do all the costs of fitting it out and bringing it up to modern safety standards. So this group of musicians talked to their friends, and they raised €500,000 within 2 months from their friends. And it's exactly what you think it is. They started with a structure and a program based on bonds. Now, a bond is a special form of loan. I'm not recommending you use bonds, although it's possible. Essentially, let's think of it as a loan. And they went to everybody they knew. And if you think about the number of musicians in Amsterdam, that's a lot of people, a few thousand musicians. And they talked to their friends and they talked to their families, and they had enough donation or loans within a couple of months to take over this whole place, which is still functioning now as a rehearsal space, but also as a performance space for small performances. It's all kinds of music. It's jazz, it's orchestral music, it's a little bit of pop and rock. And it's still run collectively by musicians. What they did after 10 years, when these loans were due to be returned, which they knew about. I mean, they had it planned financially, but after 10 years, they called every one of the people who made a loan and said, thank you so much. You let this happen. You're the people who were responsible for making this place, which they called Splendor, by the way. The name is Splendor. I don't know why. You're responsible for making this work. But by the way, we're due to give you back the money because it was a loan. Do you mind simply writing off the loan and converting it to a gift? And almost everybody said yes. So they never actually gave back the loan. And in fact, the person who then converted the loan to a gift did get some tax advantages. So in the end, they never had to repay the loans. So you can think very creatively about the form of support, but what it emphasizes is the importance of networks. because the structure of the program was important. The structure of the loans was important. The budgeting was important. But the most important thing was that they could activate these networks very quickly, starting with the artists and then working out to their friends, family, and other people in the city. You probably could do the same. I'm going to talk now about crowdfunding, magic, this magic internet thing. If you put your project on the internet, people will send you millions from Australia, from Argentina, from Alaska. People will send you money from all over the world. That's how it works, isn't it? The crowdfunding. Here's the interesting thing. Crowdfunding is thousands of years old. Now, we know that in Rome, when they built their wonderful buildings, sometimes the emperor paid for it, sometimes a wealthy individual, but often it was by public subscription. Many of the grand cathedrals of Europe were funded by crowdfunding. The only thing they didn't have was the internet, but it was funded by the crowd. The only thing that's new now is that you can do this online, which is incredibly convenient and means you're not limited by geography. There are many examples. I imagine there's something in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, which is specific to your country, maybe specific to culture. The big ones from the United States are things like Kickstarter or GoFundMe. And the Netherlands, there's a specific cultural one called Voordekunst, which just means for art. You can look at them online, Voordekunst.nl. There are many of them. The thing to remember is that just putting your project online does nothing at all. Who knows it's there? The thing about the internet is the internet mainly consists of information, of pages, of websites that nobody ever looks at. It's just a pile of rubbish. You don't want your project to be in the pile of rubbish. You want your project to be seen and for people to respond with a donation. So you must use all your available online channels to promote your project. I'm talking about things like Facebook, LinkedIn. There may be a Czech equivalent of that. You have your own website, which may have a sign-up function. And there are other channels like WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, all those channels. And you must use all those available online channels to promote your project. So once you've decided to put your project online, probably on one of these intermediary sites like Kickstarter or Voordekunst, a few people do it themselves, but that brings an extra layer of complexity. So it's probably worth giving a percentage of the money to one of these platforms, just they take care of all the technical aspects and the financial management. So once you've decided you want to do that, then you need to think, okay, how many people can we reach through our online channels, social media channels, web channels? If you don't have any online contacts, if you have 4 followers on Facebook, 1 person on LinkedIn, and that's it, forget it. You will never get any money whatsoever. Without the online network, crowdfunding doesn't work. If you have the online network, you have a good project, you put your project on a platform, then you need to do a lot of work on promoting. And Daniela told us that she did a lot of work on promoting their crowdfunding effort. It turned out not to be so successful, but they can be very successful. So the people who do well are those people who treat it like a job of work. Fundraising is work, so you need to be prepared to work at it. Good networks, good story, technical things taken care of, then you can promote it heavily and it could work. Crowdfunding tends to work best for specific projects. When I was talking earlier about foundations, actually forget foundations, when I was talking earlier about private donors and businesses, they often don't care where the money goes. So you could get money. Businesses certainly don't care where the money goes. Even if their name is attached to one particular project, if you're actually spending the money somewhere else, they don't mind because it's a transaction as long as they get what you promised them. The same with individual donors. Individual donors may just give you money for the work you do generally. That's your core costs. They don't necessarily want it to go to a particular project. Some do. That's part of the discussion. Foundations actually do tend to want to support a project, although a project could be part of your regular work that goes on for 3 years. It doesn't have to be a time-limited thing. But crowdfunding does work best if you're raising money for a new production, an international tour, whatever it might be. So probably with crowdfunding online, then you will need some kind of project to get people to contribute to with a target. Our target is 50,000. And then you have a little counter with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. That's how it works. Depending on the platform, the donors get their money back if you don't reach your target. That's different on some of the targets, but please understand before you do this, what happens if you don't quite make all the money? And if you do have a successful crowdfunding campaign online, then try to get to know the donors offline as well. That's not always possible. If they do happen to be living in Argentina, that's more difficult for you. But most of your donors will come from reasonably close to you, or at least reasonably close to places you tour if you're doing touring productions. And so maybe they want to come to the event. Maybe you want to invite them to a special presentation by your artistic director or one of the dancers or whoever it might be, because if they're engaged offline as well as online, it's much better. So try and do hybrid models. And ideally, you then get to know them in person, and their donation goes offline too. That is through one of your regular channels, rather than only online through the platform, which is also cheaper for you. Here's an example. This is my favorite example. This is Amanda Palmer. Some of you may know her. She's a fairly famous American musician. And as you see, part of what she does is to present herself in full nakedness to the world. She's a musician and an actor. And she calls herself Amanda fucking Palmer. That's her name for herself. So feel free to call her Amanda fucking Palmer, because that's what she calls herself. And she's remarkable. I mean, I have to tell you, I hate her music. I mean, I hate her music, but she is remarkable. So her story is incredible. And what it says on her body is 1 fucking million, because she was the first person ever to raise $1 million on Kickstarter to crowdfund her album. She's a free spirit. She doesn't like music labels. She didn't want to sign up to one of the big music labels. So she decided to make the album herself in 2012. And so she put her project on Kickstarter, which was quite new at the time. And within a few days, she had raised $1 million. Astonishing. And that's why she had this picture taken of herself. It was remarkable. Suddenly, she became very famous, because as the first person ever, first artist of any kind to raise $1 million on Kickstarter for her artistic production, her music album, everybody wanted to talk to her. She became more famous overnight for the Kickstarter campaign than she was ever famous for her music. And the interesting thing is that every single person, every interview she had, every comment that was made in a newspaper or magazine, everybody talked about Kickstarter. That actually this was now a form of magic. These online platforms were the key, the secret to raising money for cultural projects. She got very, very, very angry about this, to the extent that she did a TED Talk. You can look up her TED Talk on YouTube. She wrote a book, because she was so angry that everybody misunderstood what she had done. Here's the book. It's called The Art of Asking. And I have to say, it's probably the best book on fundraising I've ever read. I don't know if it's available in Czech or Slovak or any other languages, but here's the English version. And this is sort of an autobiography of her as a musician, how she started, the things she did, how she was in a band called the Dresden Dolls, and then she went into, it's actually a really good autobiography as well. And then quickly it gets to the point where she wanted to raise $1 million for her album on crowdfunding. And the thing you have to realize by the time she came to ask for this $1 million, she had spent 20 years creating a network. Every time she toured somewhere, she would meet her fans. She sometimes, because she didn't earn a lot of money, so she often ended up sleeping on the sofa of somebody in New Zealand when she was performing there. She would put the word out, hey, I'm in Christchurch in New Zealand. I have nowhere to stay. And they say, oh, come and stay at my house. And they loved that. And then people would buy her food, and occasionally musicians would join her on stage. So after 20 years, she had a network of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. That was why she could raise $1 million on Kickstarter. Kickstarter was just the platform. It was her network that raised $1 million. And the $1 million came because she had spent 20 years working to develop the network. In fact, online crowdfunding is a lot like any kind of donor seeking. You build up the networks and then you can get going with the money asking. And it's called the art of asking, because in the end, the thing she says about herself is she is not scared of asking for money. She will ask for money from anybody. She will ask for support. She'll ask for a sofa to sleep on in Christchurch, New Zealand. She will ask for a tuba player to come and support her in a concert in Anchorage, Alaska. So she is not scared of asking. And actually, this is really a big problem for people in cultural organizations. People in cultural organizations are terrified of asking for money, terrified. That's why you're also comfortable in writing an application to the government or an application to a foundation, because it doesn't seem like asking for money. But actually, when you come to private donors or businesses or online crowdfunding, yes, indeed, you are asking for money. And unless you can get over this idea that you are doing something dirty, bad, then you will never succeed. When you're asking for money, you're not asking money for you. You're not going to use, I hope, you're not going to use it to go on holiday to the West Indies. You're not going to use it to buy a new pair of skis. I hope that you're putting this money into your artistic work. So you're not asking for you, you're asking for the artistic work, which you think is incredibly important. So you can simply say that very clearly. This money is important because. I recommend you read The Art of Asking. I hope it is translated into languages maybe you're familiar with English, but if not, try and find another language version. It's a good, fun read anyway, and she's a remarkable person. And the story about how she got this $1 million, and of course she's raised more since then, is really exactly correct. Best book about fundraising I've read, because it's all about how you build a network and how you ask for money. Okay, how are we doing with time? It's okay. So now I'm going to talk very briefly about how you create a fundraising plan. So I told you each area of money you could get, each source. Now I'm talking about planning. First strategy, then structure. Big trap is that you see the structure of fundraising that somebody else uses and you say, that's the secret. So if you go to a big American theater, you will see the names of donors written on the stones. You will find on the website different levels of giving. Gold circle, silver circle, bronze circle, whatever it might be. And then you might see that if people give a certain amount of money, they get extra benefits like attendance at special events, priority booking if they're looking for tickets. That's the structure. And people who are not familiar with fundraising think that the structure is the secret. It isn't. First strategy, then structure. First, you think, how are we going to get money? Who are we going to approach? Who are we going to network? Only then do you think, okay, now we've made our strategy, what structure will help us? So maybe it is a membership program, maybe not. Maybe you do want to put donors' names on the outside of your building, maybe not. You don't have to do what somebody else did. Also, what you can't see from the outside is all the work they do behind the scenes. So first strategy, only then structure. The structure does not get the money. The strategy does. The strategy and the networks gets the money. The structure is simply the technical way of making it work. You need a case for support. I'll talk about that on the next page. You need to think about the projects. If somebody's willing to give you money, what are they giving you money for? What projects do you have and how much do they cost? What's your story about those projects? It could be long-term projects. It doesn't have to be a particular artistic project. It could be something you do every year, an education work over 3 years, for example. What networks do you have? Crucial in a fundraising plan. And if you think you're weak in a certain area, how can you develop those networks? How can you build up your mailing list? How can you get from the 3 rich people you know now to 20 rich people in a year? How can you build up those networks? What capacity do you have internally? This is the difficult part. The small artistic companies, you don't have much capacity. So to do this kind of fundraising, you need to allocate resources to it. Not a huge amount, but it's something. And if you decide you're going down this path, you need to be prepared to put resources into it. Not much money, a little, certainly some people time, including the people time of directors and some board members. So what capacity do you have? And also what expertise do you have? If nobody at all has any experience, it might be worth paying for, well, somebody like me or people you can find locally who can help you with some basic expertise to put you on the right path quickly and to stop you making mistakes. So some people, time, and some expertise. You need to think about administration. People often don't think about this. Administration is boring, but it's crucial. My goodness, if 100 people give you donations, you don't send them a thank you letter, and you never invite them to events, then they're going to be really angry with you, and they will never give you money again. Administration must be perfect, including when somebody writes to say, "I'm so sorry, my wife died. Please take her from your mailing list," but you don't, they're going to get very angry. If you spell their name wrong, they will correct you once, not twice. People get angry if you don't listen to them. So administration must be very good. When you're creating a plan, you need to prioritize. You can't do everything at the same time. Think about where your strong points lie, first of all. You can come back to the other areas later, and you need a budget for that. How much money will it cost us? How much time of people will it cost us? And you're planning for the long term. Even if you're focusing right now on a particular project, fine, that's your priority. But do it in such a way that the relationships you build up in getting to the target for the first project can also be used for the long term. Because fundraising works best over the long term because it's about building relationships. This is why it is nothing like applying for a grant from the government. It's about making friends. The case for support is one page. I say one page. Occasionally it goes to 2 pages. I'm unhappy, but okay, no more than 2 pages. It explains, why are you important? Why are you special? Who you serve, which communities, why the donor is important. So it's all about them as well. And I describe this as the DNA of your organization. I could describe it as the soul of your organization. Maybe that's a bit much, but anyway, let's say the DNA of your organization. And if you could do the case for support right, it never changes, because you may do one project this year, a different project the year after. Maybe you have a whole change of purpose in 3 years' time. But as long as the DNA stays the same, then projects will come and go around that core of your organization. I describe it as being part of a triangle, including your mission and your vision and your brand. Many of you will know what your brand is, then it goes alongside it. Case for support, mission and vision and brand are all part of the same story. This is the story. And unless you can write it in one page, you're in real trouble. Because if you can't write it in one page, then you can't talk to people. It's not as small as the famous elevator pitch, where you have 30 seconds to explain your film to Steven Spielberg, but it's not far away. Unless you, in writing or verbally, can say to somebody very quickly, this is why we're important, this is why we're unique, this is what you could do for us, and this is the project we're thinking of at the moment, then you're in trouble. They won't take half an hour to read a 50-page document. Case for support is crucial before you start any fundraising. In conclusion, fundraising is about storytelling. And you can tell the same story in different ways, depending on who you're talking to, but fundamentally, you need a very strong story. You need networks. You probably have networks. You need to develop them more. First strategy, then structure. You don't create a program, a scheme, before thinking about why you're doing that. What's the purpose of this? Prioritization and budget. Behind the scenes, this is like a business activity. You have to invest some time and money in the expectation that you will get more time or more money back in the future. You're planning for the long term. And fundraising is about building relationships. Here's a question for you. Whenever I go and see a new client in a new area, they always ask me who I've worked with, which is like them. I'm doing a big project at the moment with the Koninklijke Bibliotheek. That's the Royal Library of the Netherlands, the National Library of the Netherlands. And when I went to speak to them, first of all, they said, okay, how many other national libraries have you worked for? I said, listen, every country has one national library. How many chances have I had to work with a national library? Well, national libraries are different. Yes, national libraries are different. But the truth is that the fundraising techniques I'm using for the National Library are exactly the same techniques as I would use for a hospital or a theatre. The techniques are exactly the same. How you apply them is very different. So how are dance companies different? You're not special at all. Absolutely not. You can learn from anyone. Dance companies, everybody likes to think they're special. This is another excuse. The 10 myths I mentioned previously are 10 excuses. 10 excuses for why we're not going to get the money. We're not even going to try because of the myths. I mean, these are reasons we're not going to be successful. And everybody, not just dance companies, starts by saying, well, this might work for theatres, this might work for museums, but it's not going to work for us because we're a dance company. And also, occasionally people don't work with me because I have not previously worked with a company which is so specific that actually there is nobody else I could have worked with. It's a way of saying no. It's a way of saying we will never achieve this. The techniques that I've just explained to you will work for anybody. They will work for you. And this means you can also learn from anybody else. So if you find a charity that supports animals, ask what they do, because it may be you can use some of the techniques they use in a very different context. You can learn from anybody. And the things that are unique about you, and this is where you really need to focus, is your story. Every dance company is different. I mean, I suppose I haven't looked in detail at all of your companies, but in a sense, some of you are quite similar. But you're not. You must find the points where your story is completely different to anybody else. It could be geography, it could be history, it could be who you try to serve, it could be the international tour, whatever. Your story is absolutely unique. So you need to spend a lot of time thinking about your story. And your networks are also unique. You're not in competition for funds. Your networks are your networks. There's an overlap, of course. Sometimes you find your donors also supporting somebody else. Well, that's great. People choose who they give money to. You can't protect them. They're not your property. But for the most part, your networks are your networks. So back to where I started, which is the thing that's unique about you is not that you're a dance company. That's not that special. It's that you have a particular story, which includes the dance, and your networks are unique, and that's your ammunition, your raw material. That's the end of my presentation. My contact details are there if you need them.